Well, good day, my friends. We are in Carrollton, Georgia, and today we're starting at a church called Our Lady of Perpetual Help Catholic Church. This is not your average church because we've come to several celebrity graves that were at a church or in the cemetery of the church, but it's not often, and I think this might be the first time we've ever went to a church that was built by the celebrity that's buried here. Daze with Jordan the Lion begins now. If you look at the bottom, you'll see it was dedicated in March of 1962. And this was the woman that we knew as Susan Hayward, and her husband built this church. They actually lived at the time right across the street, right over there. Her husband was her second husband, Floyd Eaton Chalkley, actually owned 300 acres out here. So there's a cemetery right over here where they're buried. Both of them are buried, and I'll show you the church that they created as well. Susan Hayward had a very, very interesting life. She played a very strong woman on screen, and a lot of it came from her upbringing and all the challenges that she had that ended up continuing all through her life. And she even had a very controversial death that we'll talk about as well. I've walked around this church. It is a very beautiful church, no question. It's got mosaics around the windows. I love that design right above the entryway. And the Chalkleys, Susan and her husband, are actually buried right there. Also, this might be a first where the cemetery was designed by the actress that's buried here as well. You see these white statues. We'll go take a look at some of them. Those were all gifted by Susan Hayward and her husband. So her story is that she was born and raised in Flatbush, New York. Her father was a barker at Coney Island. Her mother was a real matriarch, she ran the household, she ran everything, and basically emasculated her husband, which was Susan Hayward's father. But Susan Hayward, we wouldn't end up knowing until she was 20 years old, because her original name was Edith Mariner. So young Edith's father was basically emasculated by her mother, and her mother would be the kind of woman that Susan would end up portraying on screen usually. Now what's fascinating, here's the grave. This was actually the first grave in this cemetery when her husband, love of her life, Floyd Eaton Chalkley, passed away, 1966. But here is Susan's grave right here beside him. Susan Hayward Chalkley. You see, she had a tumultuous life because the family was extremely poor. Her father had a hard time making a good living, and they struggled. And Edith, who was Susan, she had very bad eyesight, and they told her that she needed glasses, but the family couldn't afford glasses. And when she was 7, she accidentally wandered out into traffic and was hit by a car and ended up breaking her hip and fracturing both of her legs. So she would end up being in a body cast for quite a while, and when she got out of it, after several months, not only did she have that bad eyesight, but now she had a limp that would follow her for about the next decade of her life. She was not very well received when she went to school, so she kept to herself until she was 12 years old, when she got a part in a play. She got the starring part, and she was so good that everybody started to like her then. And so for several years throughout the rest of her school days, she would star in the plays. And even when she graduated from high school, her yearbook said one of our future stars, one of our burgeoning future actresses. So when she turned 18, she had this beautiful red hair, and color filming was coming out, so she was very well sought after, and was discovered by a modeling agency that got her into Noxzema ads. They got her into different candy ads, and then eventually got her on the cover of the Saturday Evening Post. So from there, she was discovered by someone that worked for David O. Selznick, and she was called out to Hollywood to audition for Scarlett O'Hara. So she was the youngest person to go out and audition, which she did, and did not get the part. And in fact, David O. Selznick told her she should go back to New York, but she told him, "I like the oranges here, I think I'll stay." And very shortly after that, she got her first 6-month contract with Warner Brothers. She did make a movie, but it wasn't very good, and then got a better contract going to Paramount. Now, one of the things that always plagued her career was not her ability, it was always that it was just, you never knew whether it was going to be a good project or not, and she complained about that a lot. They would give her subpar scripts to work with, her performance would be amazing, but throughout her career, she was actually up for, or nominated for 5 Academy Awards, and it took her 20 years before she finally won on the 5th nomination for I Want to Live. So when she was about 28, she was dating who would become her future husband, Jess Barker, and he was an actor also. She ended up getting pregnant, and so they got married, and then 7 months later, she had their fraternal twin sons. But he lost his contract almost immediately, and because of the way she grew up and seeing her mom and everything, she kind of ended up becoming that person where it was really damaging their relationship, the fact that she was being successful and making money and he wasn't. And he eventually became the house husband, and they ended up fighting a lot, drinking a lot. She would have success in her career where, like I said, she would end up being nominated for 3 Oscar awards or Academy Awards while they were together, but they would get into knockdown, drag out fights. It's actually said one of the last fights that they had, she tried to throw him in the pool and then put a cigarette out on his face, and he blackened her eyes for days. So on their 9th wedding anniversary, she divorced him. She filed for divorce and decided to move on. The following year, she was nominated for another Academy Award, didn't win, and then after a big fight with him, she ended up swallowing 2 bottles of pills, drank a bottle of gin, and then called her mother and said goodbye and said that she would be well taken care of, and her mother called the police and they went and saved her life. Now, after she got a divorce from her husband and moved on, it was in 1957 that she would meet the man of her dreams, Mr. Floyd Eaton Chalkley. I called him Eaton. Eaton, they were just pretty much a match made in heaven. He had been a federal agent and then an attorney, and then owned a Cadillac dealership here, and she wasn't big on money. She was actually very frugal. Her son said the only nice thing she really ever did for herself was buy a mink coat when she started making money so that she could wear it around to show some of her success, but other than that, she was very frugal. So they fell in love, and he lived out here where I showed you, literally right across the street. He owned all that property, so they built a farmhouse or a ranch house over there, built a lake, stocked it with fish, and spent their time with animals and everything over there. And then eventually, because they were devout, they ended up deciding to build this church. So that's where the church came in, and she designed the cemetery. I don't know if it was always intended to be a cemetery or not, or if it was the fact that Eaton passed away, but shortly after them finishing this church, or dedicating the church, Eaton's only son died. And when he died, Eaton had contracted hepatitis when he was in the war. And he started drinking a lot, not taking care of himself, and his health just started to completely decline. So normally where Susan Hayward would have been, you know, not put up with it because of the way she was with her other husband, she actually was the opposite here. She took care of him for the rest of his life until he ended up passing away, sadly. And even for a long time, I don't think that Susan Hayward was even there. For a long time, it just said F. Eaton Chalkley, and below it you can see it says Mrs. F. E. Chalkley, and that's really all that was there. Didn't even have her birth or death dates, from what I understand. That was added later. She was 57 at the time of her death. Now what's sad is, you know, after he died, she just really couldn't go on without him. She started wearing black, wouldn't do anything, was sad all the time. And so she ended up selling the property across the road and just completely got out of town and moved to Fort Lauderdale, Florida for a while. And then pretty much had stopped acting altogether, and then was asked to do Valley of the Dolls. So she decided to do that, which was about a 2-week shoot. And then after that, she did about a 90-run performance in Vegas of MAME until her voice literally completely gave out. And then she had health problems for the rest of her life. She had lung cancer, brain cancer, she had tumors in her brains. And that's where the controversy comes from. Like I said, you know, she was in really bad health. She was having seizures a lot, but was invited to present the Academy Award with Charlton Heston, who she had made a movie about Andrew Jackson when Charlton Heston was just coming up. So they were to present this together, and she demanded to do it and went and did it. And right after the performance, when she went out to the limo that was waiting for her, she had a seizure there and was really sick for the next couple of years until she ended up passing away. And her son said she was in total pain for the rest of her life. She was almost in the fetal position every day, just basically wanting everything to end. And he said that she got to a point where she couldn't eat, she couldn't walk, she couldn't do anything. Pretty sad for such a tough lady for that to be the end of her life. But now let me tell you the controversy to her death, which also ties into John Wayne, Dick Powell, and Agnes Moorehead. So in that year after she divorced her first husband, and between the time that she had the attempt to take her own life, she accepted to be in a movie called The Conqueror with the actors I just mentioned. And Dick Powell was actually the producer on this. They decided to film it in Utah. Now the problem was that area had been known to be where they did a lot of had a high radiation from where they were doing a lot of the military testing. And the production looked into it. The government said there was no risk at all, and so they ended up making the movie. Now, after the movie was finished, 91 of the 220 people, crew, that were on that production ended up getting some form of cancer. John Wayne got lung cancer, stomach cancer, brain cancer. Dick Powell got lung cancer. Susan Hayward ended up having brain cancer, lung cancer. Agnes Moorehead had uterine cancer. Even Agnes Moorehead at the end of her life blamed this production, said she should have never ever done it. They don't know why the government lied to them, but they believe that it was basically, you know, even though they were filming over 100 miles away, the downwind draft was sending it all their direction. And yeah, just a really, really sad story, especially because they ended up bringing 160 tons of that dirt back to Los Angeles for reshoots and things like that, so even more people were affected in the end. She made a lot of great movies, always had a great performance, absolutely beautiful redhead, and I'm so glad that in the end she finally did get her due. She did get her Academy Award after waiting 20 years. Now let me show you around the church and some of the really cool mosaics they have on the windows. It's pretty full today because it's Sunday and they have services in Spanish and morning, afternoon services, but these mosaics are wonderful. And what a nice lasting legacy for the community. They said when she was here, she never acted like Susan Hayward. She was just Miss Eaton Chalkley. Would hop in a truck in her blue jeans and would go to the hardware store just like anybody else. I like that one. That one's really good. I'm obviously not going to go in and film inside while they're having service, but beautiful church. If you want to check out some of her nominated movies, they were Smash Up, With a Song in My Heart, I'll Cry Tomorrow. Try those. Those are really, and then of course I Want to Live, that's the one that she won with. When Susan passed away and they did the autopsy, the doctors actually couldn't believe that she had survived as long as she had in so much pain, because they said her brain was absolutely riddled with tumors. So sad. So freaking sad. Alright my friends, I'm going to call it a day. I want to thank Susan Moore and Alicia Anderson for becoming my newest Patreons, helping to support this channel. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Please hit the notifications bell and hit the like button. Also, down below, put what your favorite Susan Hayward movie is. We'll see you all next time. Have a great night and goodbye.